1895, the Utah Constitution indicates that public education is to be free for its students. In 1994, a permanent injunction was made to ensure that Utah's public schools do not discriminate against students on the basis of relative wealth, that no student is prevented from participating in any aspect of public education because of poverty, and that all public schools waive school fees for eligible students. Over the past few years, Utah State Board of Education has been reviewing practices and guidelines to help schools determine what a fee is, waiver eligibility, and make sure they are in compliance with the injunction established in 1994.
Hello, I'm Angie Stallings, Deputy Superintendent of Policy with the Utah State Board of Education. I'm here to give you a bit of the background behind the recent changes we've had with our school fees laws, including the board rule that the Utah State Board of Education adopted. In the 2017 legislative session, the legislature passed a bill to repeal many of the reporting requirements related to school fees and how school districts and charter schools set their fee schedule. In April of that year, the USBE staff began to look at how we would amend our rule now that the code had been amended. And our internal audit department began an audit of school fees practices out in the districts and charter schools. Shortly after the internal audit department at the Utah State Board of Education released their audit, the legislature's audit department also became interested in school fees practices out in districts and charter schools.
The results of both audits were conclusive. Almost nothing had changed since the permanent injunction in 1994. The State Board of Education quickly recognized the need to update our policies and to support school districts and charter schools in improving their practices. The State Board of Education created the School Fees Task Force, which included 14 members that represented legislators, local school board members, district superintendents, principals, charter directors, and those who represent refugee populations and low-income students. These members met multiple times to revamp our board rule and make other recommendations, including updates to the Utah Code provisions that govern school fees. One of the findings the task force discovered was that over the past 5 years, school fees collected had grown 29% to $71 million in 2017, while secondary school enrollment was up only 20%. During that time period, students who qualified for fee waivers increased 7.6%, but the percentage of students participating with fee waivers dropped 5.1%.
Earlier this year, in January 2019, the board's School Fees Task Force reported to the Finance Committee as well as the board on recommendations for a complete overhaul of the board's rule R277407, as well as statutory changes that the board recommended. Representative Lisenby, who was a member of the board's School Fees Task Force, ran legislation which passed the legislature in March of 2019. The accompanying legislation that Representative Lisenby ran is now in effect, and the updates to Board Rule R277407 are also in effect, but do not take legal effect until the 2020-21 school year.
One of the biggest changes to R277407 was understanding the definition of what a fee is. A fee is defined as something of monetary value requested or required by an LEA as a condition to a student's participation in an activity, class, or program which is provided, sponsored, or supported by the school. The State Board of Education wants to preserve equal opportunity for all students and to limit diversion of money, school, and staff resources from the basic school program. Each LEA's fee policies shall be designed to limit student expenditures for school-sponsored activities, including expenditures for activities, uniforms, clubs, clinics, travel, and subject area and vocational leadership organizations, whether local, state, or national. Overall, The board's goal is to increase access for students to participate in all the programs and activities that our school districts and charter schools offer. We have a very large wealth of opportunities for our students. Many LEAs had the misunderstanding that if a program was optional for a student to participate in, that it was also optional for the district or charter to waive those fees. Although a course, program, or activity may be optional for you as the district or charter school to provide, and it may also be optional for the student to participate or enroll, it is not optional for schools to waive those fees. We need to ensure that every student has access when resources or money is an issue for that family. The updated definition of fee includes implied pressure or implied request to provide something to participate on a team. Let's say you have a student who participates on the football team at a high school, and as part of the travel team, there's an expectation that the team wear a certain uniform that is not required for play. Because every participant wears that traveling uniform, t-shirt, hoodie, shoes, etc., it is now subject to fee waiver because it was requested or required either explicitly or implicitly in order to be part of the team. Many things that in the past districts and charters thought were optional or not required to be part of the team, we now understand that they are all considered a fee. All those expenses should be included in your district or charter fee schedule. New provisions of R277407 require school districts or charter school governing boards to approve fee schedules annually in a public meeting by April 1st. As part of that process, each LEA is required to provide 2 opportunities for public comment in 2 separate meetings before the fee schedule is adopted on April 1st. These public comment meetings must take place before the board takes action for the final fee schedule approved. Another new requirement states that if your school district or charter school has a population of students and families that speak a language other than English, and 20% or more of those families speak the same language, you are required to provide notice to those families in a second language. The notices provided of the meetings and public comment periods must be provided in the same way that you communicate with parents for other requirements. It can be provided through registration materials or sent out in email. Follow the same form of communication that your LEA uses to send notices out to families about upcoming fee schedules and public comment hearings, and the fact that the board will be approving a fee schedule. Additional requirements set by the board rule will be reviewed in our next USBE Instructables installment. The State Board of Education has a shared responsibility in helping you and all of us provide more access to our students to these wonderful opportunities, courses, activities, and programs that we have in Utah. We are here to support you in providing model policies, training, and information. Please don't hesitate to reach out to our school fee staff. We are all on the road to awesome.
So this is the premiere of this video. Besides Tammy and maybe, Barbara, of course, we have to thank Barbara Fuentes, who you probably recognize her voice on there. She did the lion's share of the editing and putting that Instructable together, as well as doing a lot of the voiceover. Tammy Daly, of course, and others. I think there's only about 5, maybe 10 at the most, people besides the board who've seen that Instructable. And we will post that online, and we will make it available to LEAs. Tammy and I have received multiple requests from districts and charters to come to board study sessions to support their superintendent or charter director in a study session, and we just don't have the capacity to travel the state to do that. So what we hoped we could do is give a 10-minute video that gives a short summary that superintendents, charter directors can then use with their own board members to review these issues, and then the superintendents or other LEA representatives can use with their coaches, teachers, etc. And as it's stated there at the very end of the video, Tammy, Barbara, and others will be working on it. Approximately 5 more of those videos, instructable videos on different topics like fee waivers, what is school sponsored. Do you want to explain which ones they are?
Yeah, the next one out is going to be kind of a local boards, what their new and their old responsibilities. So it'll be directed primarily at the boards themselves. And then we have one coming out about the parents. That'll be there for more of a public view as to how what's available to them and some resources for them to go out. And then the last 3 are more directed right at the administration of the fee schedules, talking about fundraisings and donations, which is a hot topic, school uniforms and activity clothing, and administering the fee waivers. And those will be we're hopefully to put those on the Canvas platform so that they will be accessed by others, and they'll have kind of like some case studies and stuff that they can work through perhaps and have that instruction.
So now you may have seen in the backup documentation that's on Civic Clerk, there's quite a few documents there. We don't expect you to have read all of that, especially the 50-page court order. I know that's large. One thing I did want to mention that is on there that you may not have noticed, if you've been interested in the permanent injunction from 1994, but you didn't know if you were willing to spend time to read 50 to 75 pages of legal writing. There is I want to say 3 to 4 page summary of the permanent injunction that one of our former AAGs prepared for the task force last year, and that could be a quicker overview if you are interested in that. And then also on there, we've got a number of documents that you can find on the school fees website, which are the information packet. We'll go through some other documents summarizing those as we move along. But why don't we start with the PowerPoint presentation. We're going to skip over some of these slides because they were covered in the video. And also, for many of you, a lot of this information is repetitious, especially those board members who served on the task force. You probably could be sitting here giving this presentation in our place. So, and as the video stated, the biggest, heaviest lift of the task force was redefining or making clear what the fee definition was and what constitutes a fee. As it stated in the video, previously many districts and charter schools thought that if a program was optional or it was optional for students to participate, that the fee was optional, or that things such as food or travel or the traveling uniform, that none of those were subject to fee waiver. Well, we now have made it explicitly clearer, and even before the definitions were updated this last round, it was the legal interpretation of our staff as well as those who perform the audits that everything that is required or expected is a fee, because at the end of the day, our public education system is supposed to be a free resource and support for our community. So if you want to go to the next. And can I say, if you would like to ask questions or stop, please do. This is an opportunity for discussion, and we're willing to stop at any time.
We have one right now.
Sorry. Hey, so question on the traveling clothes, and this has come up at some of the schools in my district. What if it's not a particular uniform? What if it's like you have to wear a suit? Mm-hmm. You know, the football team on Friday, everybody wears a suit. And some of the young men didn't have money for a suit, and so it was all over Facebook about how a teacher was buying suits for these young men who didn't have the money, which was very kind of the teacher to do. But I just wondered, is that considered traveling clothes if they're required to wear a suit on game days?
I think a suit is one of those harder issues to deal with. So in general, just like footwear or clothing, every child is expected, their family, or you don't have to provide just regular street shoes or gym shoes for your gym class. You can have an expectation that kids bring appropriate clothing, whether that's a jacket on rainy days, etc. I think the suit is a difficult one. If you were to say maybe a shirt and tie, you might be able to get away with saying we're not requiring prescriptive clothing. But once you get into the area of a suit, I think you just stated it correctly. Not every, person under the age of 18 just has a suit. And so if you're going to require a suit, there's a good chance you may have to provide that suit or the resources to support that student and family buying a suit. The other thing the district could do, however, is change. And instead of having everybody wear a suit on Fridays, why don't you have everybody wear a hoodie? And, the hoodie might be $20, which is a lot easier for a district or charter to waive than, an $80 to $150 suit. But that's something that we haven't been explicit about, but I would say if someone were to ask me whether a suit it now needs to be required, if you are requiring it for participation and the student does not have the resources or the family doesn't have the resources to buy the suit, that is a barrier to access to that team. And the student is going to be identified or shamed if that student doesn't have the suit like the rest of the wrestling team or football team. So it's a fee, yeah. Okay. All right. School sponsor. Do you want to talk about that one?
Okay. In the definition, we talk about school-sponsored and supported, and we've had, in fact, I've got some questions from the media about this, that, we see that school-sponsored or supported can be, these are things that, it's not an exhaustive list, but things that that need to be looked at, and that's the free use of the property, if there's elements, yeah.
That it's probably school-sponsored.
Yes, elements that show that it's school-sponsored. The advertising, how is it advertised? Use of the school name. The employees assisting. Now, there are particular requirements not in the school fees regulation, but there is another employee regulation for educators, and so they need to be mindful of that as if they are falling in that category, that they are sponsoring this activity as part of their job at the school. And is the LEA handling the funds? Follow the money. The money always knows where things are going. And how do they contact the students? How do they recruit the students for this activity? Are they using the teachers or coaches are using their position to promote the activities? And now non-curricular clubs. If you come and get a club, those non-curricular clubs are specifically excluded, but they have certain regulations also as to how they're organized, and they are recognized by the LEA as a non-curricular club.
Yeah, so an example of that from yesterday, you'll remember we talked about after-school programs. Another example of where you're kind of in a gray area would be a camp that often the entire team goes to. And so those would be two examples where you, as either the school fees representative, the LEA leader, the principal, the coach, would want to look at these criteria. And the more of those criteria that you have, the more likely it is school-sponsored. If you want to establish, say, an after-school program and partner or allow a third-party provider like Boys and Girls Club or YMCA to run the after-school program, but on your premises, there are ways of providing that access to your school grounds and property, but it not be an official LEA-sponsored activity. So just be aware, we provide guidance, and Tammy specifically provides a lot of guidance in this area, and I believe you're going to be doing a decision tree that helps guide if this and this, well, then it's school sponsored. If this and this, it's not, or you're safer in saying it's not school sponsored. And as I stated to superintendents earlier this week, when in doubt, talk to your legal counsel about it if you're worried, or if it's a third-party provider, have their legal counsel look at it. But at the end of the day, it's the LEA that these provisions apply to. It's the school district charter school. It is not YMCA, Boys and Girls Club, whatever ABC private daycare provider. They are not the ones who are responsible or have the liability to comply with school fees. It's the school and the school district and the charter school.
A district high school football team charges an amount to try out for the team, which has been not received well by many parents, as you could imagine. That's not refunded if they don't make the team. But is that still a fee?
That would be subject to fee waiver. Just as, yeah. And it does have to be listed on the schedule.
Do I throw
fee
them under the bus? Bingham High School. We struggle with that.
If it's on the fee schedule, they can charge it, but it is subject to fee waiver. Yeah.
If they're not on a team, they're still trying out, right? Oh.
Yep, if it's on the schedule and the board approves it, that's.
Okay.
I'm just hearing from Todd Harbour that there's a legal prohibition on tryout fees, so you may want to have them re-examine that.
Before it begins.
Board member
I'm just
there.
waiting for the kibitzing to end.
There you go.
I think you mentioned that the LEA is responsible. I think it's also important to say that it's not going to be in the end the teacher that's going to be responsible. Teacher doesn't have any, unless it's like defiant and obnoxious and sabotaging, but it's going to be the LEA that's responsible for all those individual teachers, random coaches, part-time coaches, volunteer coaches. All those people are going to make the LEA make the LEA responsible.
Correct.
So I think that's an important. Makes training constantly really important.
Okay. And as we mentioned in the video, one of the new, even now, an LEA is not allowed to impose a fee or charge a fee unless and until it has been listed on a fee schedule and approved by the governing board. And that is current law. And as the video stated, coming up, that will have to be done by April 1st of each year, and the intent of that was to have that done before registration. And there also has to be 2 opportunities for members of the public to provide comment and notice sent out in kind of your regular form of notifications that there will be public comment periods and that a fee schedule is going to be approved by the local board or charter school governing board. So.
And then what we talk about in these fee schedules and what we've gone out and learned is that, even, a teacher requesting, something on a dress down day or something on a Friday, that's part of a fee. And so these schools are having to greatly expand their fee schedules to things that weren't thought of as being fees before. But the fee schedule has some components and a specific in the code and rule that it has to be a specific amount. Now, it can say up to, but it has to be a specific amount with a maximum for each student and for each activity. And then also there's a maximum that's required now for the student itself, across all the activities, and that needs to be adhered to also. And then there's a clear and easy way to understand the fee delineation, which is basically what are you going to be using the fee for? What is it for? How is it going to be spent? And this is something and they need to have their fee waiver policy and a spending plan. Now, I just recently got through working. We're not through yet. We have been working with a spend plan work group, and we've been trying to go through as to what that means. And this statement here is what the work group has drafted and would like to, and probably will be bringing to the board. I've got to go through one more meeting to get the consensus of it, but I think we're there. That a spend plan provides students, parents, and employees transparency by identifying school fee funding uses. The spend plan identifies the needs in the program for the fees being charged. The spend plan should provide a list descriptive of anticipated types of expenditures now or as carry forward funded by the schools. Now, my accounting brain, there's lots of details that goes into that, but we needed to put this at a point where that the schools knew what they needed to do. Now, I wanted a list with an amount, very specific, but there was a lot of concern with that. And so what we decided on for now, and I think it may need to change in the future because of other requirements that are coming up in the school fee requirements. But for now, it's just a description of what they're going to spend and how they're going to spend those funds. Okay. Okay. I just want to say one thing also. The schools need to think of these funds as restricted funds. So if they say that they're going to collect the fee, and this is why we want this delineation in the code, they have to think about it as restricted funds and have to use that program of funds.
And you're done.
And I'm done.
Yeah.
Okay.
Question. There was
Got a question or comment. Board Member Linda Hansen?
So I've talked to Angie about this. My concern is with the maximum student amounts that we may eventually have to put some kind of cap or something on it, because if you set a maximum student amount at $100,000, nobody's ever going to meet it, right? And some of the districts are setting them quite high, so more than any student is ever going to get, right? That's kind of the point. But I assume the point of the maximum is to kind of give the student a break, right? Is that not true?
Yeah, to give them a break and to set an expectation. If you pay $3,500, that should cover everything that you're ever going to need to
Everything
spend.
you're doing.
Or
So
$1,500.
Yeah, so to look at it and say, okay, well, the student that pays the most in our district is paying $4,000, so let's set it at $5,500. And then, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard some of that. So I'm a little concerned that those maximums aren't going to work the way they should work. And so, it's something that I think we ought to take note of and see how they're working, and maybe we'll have to tweak and put some kind of not a numeric cap, but maybe 3 times, the highest activity, or you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Something like that in rules, so that they're not set so high that nobody in their district can ever hit them.
Yeah. And as a reminder, this requirement to set the aggregate total maximum per student doesn't take effect till the next school year. But I am aware that there are many school districts, and I'm sure charter schools, who've started to set those aggregate maximums. Some of them are taking the step by setting a maximum per trip. For example, they might say no trip can cost more than $999, whereas in the past, some of them might have been $2,500. It may seem like a small step, but it actually is a very large step toward achieving, I think, the underlying spirit of the law, which is let's try and rein in these expenses and the expectations so that it's not such a burden on not just our low-income families, but our middle-income families. It's a burden for everyone, right?
Board Member Belknap?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment that this was a discussion in the task force a lot. And one of the things that is a lever 11 on this is that however much you set that at, you have to be able to waive that. And so that kind of keeps that lever. The other thing is I've heard that same thing, but I haven't seen it anywhere. When I've seen people's fee schedules, I've never seen a maximum that seemed too obnoxious. So I hear that, but I haven't seen it.
And we talked a lot about that in the
Yeah.
video.
Yeah, eligibility fee waivers. Go ahead.
Okay, so this is a caveat which the media's kind of picked up on a little bit, and that's that we have set some very quantitative who is qualified now. The board here is supposed to set direction, but the individual as to what information or what is they have to be able to show to be qualified, some parameters around that, but it's the local boards who set that, for their specifics and how that's to do. And of course, the students who qualify for free lunch, and the students who apply for SSI, TANF, and child care services and state custody, but it's this latter one, any student that is, if charged the fee, would be denied the opportunity to fully participate or complete as required because of inability to pay the fee. And that's what everyone is struggling in, is how do you quantify that, or how do you make that work specifically. But again, that's something the individual LEAs or local LEAs will be struggling with, but it has caught some media attention.
And Tammy, I think now would be a good time to also just let the board know that you've been receiving, especially recently, quite a few calls from families and parents who are having a hard time even accessing the forms, knowing who to take the form to, the application to get the fee waiver. I don't know if you want to give any anecdotal experiences or calls.
Yeah, we put our number out there, and, of course, through January through about May, it was mostly the LEAs administrators calling. About 38% of those were from, what are waivers, what are fees. But now through June and July, probably about 90% of our calls are actually from parents because they've been registering. They're very hesitant to say which school because they want to be anonymous because they don't want repercussions to their student. But they also are like, and I have been getting calls as where do I get the fee waiver form? Now we have the form on our website, but it is and it's usually what happens, the school actually connects to our website for the form. But I've had parents call me and I was told you had the form for me to fill out. And so I'm having them email them the form, and then I try to as I give it back or send it back to them, I try to get the local school fees contact, the LEA contact involved, and then here's the form and here's the person to go talk to now to finish up the process. But I was a little surprised at that we were getting those calls directly into the state here. And I'm sure I handle probably about 3 to 4 on average a week. It's not every day, but it's we're starting to ramp up, and I'm sure we'll get a lot more once school begins. But I've had some sent to me from Christelle and the other groups here at USBE as they try to also help these students work these processes.
We have another question, but some of the phone calls I've been getting. And I steer them to their LEA. They don't know, first of all, what an LEA is. Yeah. They have a hard time even knowing what district they belong to, so they Google and try to find something, and what pops up is State Board of Education, so they think we're in charge of all of it. Yep. And so I probably have had 20 plus phone calls, and I don't know how they find me, but it's really easy. And I say, hey, get back with me I ask where they live, and then I say, I believe you're in this. Get back with me if you can't get any help there. Yeah. And I haven't ever got a call back.
Yeah, and we've been very good about giving them a specific name and number of a person, and then we tell them, just call us back if you.
But I think part of that's a perception thing because they know where their school is, but then the governance and everything else they're trying to figure it out, and which they have great faith in Utah's public education system that good things are happening, and they probably don't feel like they need to know who their local board member or superintendent is. But Board Member Lear had a question or comment.
I have a question. On this slide where it says the school qualifies for free school lunch, I thought that the rule changed that language to say that the superintendent shall set a standard. It doesn't say free school lunch anymore. So is that a little confusing, maybe?
No, it says.
Well, can you pull up the form, pull up the website real quick and show the form? The way the rule was changed, instead of saying the student qualifies for a fee waiver if they qualify for free lunch, instead what we've said is the superintendent establishes the income levels, and they are the free lunch income levels. And the reason we did that is because we heard from many LEAs that students who ask for free lunch, it's a self-declaration and it's not often verified. So you could have a student's family who's, middle income or high income making much more than the free lunch guidelines require. And what the LEAs don't want to do is discourage kids from getting free lunch and reduced lunch. So they are allowed, LEAs could, if they wanted to take their free lunch list and just simply apply or allow fee waivers across the board for all those students, they could do that. But because, again, qualification for the actual free and reduced lunch program is a self-declaration that you do not have to provide evidence of qualification. The LEA may also ask for income, tax returns, pay stubs, et cetera, to see if you qualify under those guidelines.
Sorry, I really wasn't so much concerned about the explanation. I was really saying, I think it's confusing if your slide says free school lunch, but nowhere in the rule anymore it says free school lunch. It says that the superintendent shall set a limit, and I think
But I think it does say tied to that.
You need to sync those two somehow, so that if the slide says one thing, the rule also says that in some way. But the other point, I think, is the law requires the school districts to do verification. They can't choose to verify or not. The law requires, it says they shall verify. But I just think you need to make sure those are synced, because it says now free school lunch here, which has been the common understanding, but the rule says something else. And I think the rule, I'm always one that
We
says
could
the
just
rule
put
needs to be the
based
final
on- Yeah.
decider.
So what we could do in subsection 2, it states the superintendent shall annually establish income levels for fee waiver eligibility and publish the income levels on the board's website. Those have always been tied to free lunch.
Right.
But, so what we could do next round, and just so you know, they've already been established for this year, and they are tied to the income levels.
They're tied to, or they are the same?
They are the same. That's
Okay,
the same.
that's
So I'm just
helpful.
saying it differently. They are the same as the income
That's
eligibility
helpful to know.
requirements for free lunch. That is the intent of the team and of the superintendent, which in this case is Tammy, acting on the superintendent's behalf, to keep it at that. We were responding to an LEA request, this language to take it out, actually they asked for, because they said it was creating confusion among parents that if you qualified for free lunch, you automatically got a fee waiver, and that's not the
I
case.
get all that, just don't
Yeah.
use it then in the slide maybe, then just refer them to the superintendent's.
I guess that I would just say, I think it's appropriate to use in the slide because that is what it is tied to. It is based on, it is the same as, and so it's a way for us to communicate to the world that as the superintendent is establishing these income levels, they are the same income levels as those that
Then I
qualify for
would
free
add it
lunch.
to the rule, so if you Google free school lunch in the rule, you can find it.
Okay, we could make that change. Okay, do you want to keep
Thanks.
going to the next
Oh, Mark,
one?
what am I-
Are there any other questions, or should we just keep going? Okay. One thing that's important to know is if a student qualifies for a fee waiver, they qualify for a full fee waiver, meaning you can't just give them a partial fee waiver. If a family wants to, let's say they qualify for a full fee waiver, the family could choose voluntarily to pay for a partial amount. Or, for example, the category of students that don't necessarily qualify for fee waivers under TANF or SSI, et cetera, if you have middle or high-income families that are going through something, you could offer a partial or a full fee waiver also. So yesterday, this was changed, as you know, we changed the project-based courses. The previous language stated that you could not essentially charge a fee for project-based courses, and that was meant to say you couldn't charge fee for each individual project as you went along the way. Now we've clarified it, that there can be an overall fee for, say, ceramics or photography or shop, but that fee is subject to fee waiver as any other fee for any other course. And then if students would like to pay for their own discretionary or upgraded, I guess you could say, project, they are allowed to do that, and the LEA may require the student to pay for the materials or whatever it takes for that additional discretionary project. And the language also states that the school should avoid allowing high-cost additional projects, because you don't want, if everybody in the class starts making an armoire, and yet the basic is the birdhouse, you start to get a little bit of that peer pressure, and again, kind of an implied pressure to come up with the funds to do what everybody else is doing. So textbook, this is some,
Sorry, I had another question. This rule seems to be silent on the old issue of who keeps the project.
Mm-hmm.
And so is it just supposed to be silent? Is there any, if the student creates, and I don't, just, Is the student supposed to keep it, or is the LEA supposed to keep it, or is it up to the LEA?
It's up to the LEA. I will say that the permanent injunction talked about this exact issue, and in kind of a negative way viewed the fact that there were LEAs that if a student had qualified for fee waiver, they weren't letting them take the birdhouse home, for example, but the students had, yeah, or whatever. And the court said if the school was doing that in a way that identified the student, that was not allowed. So if, like, in class they said, okay, you 16 students, you can take yours home, but you 4, sorry, you can't. That you cannot do. So the LEA is going to have to be very careful about how they allow students to take or keep projects, that it doesn't create astigmatism or, a stigma, not astigmatism. I think I have been getting astigmatism in my eye. I've got to go get my eyes checked, but anyway.
So the answer is, the short answer is
It's up to the LEA, correct.
Thank you.
So textbooks, in statute, you'll remember last year that the statute states that beginning with the 2022-23 school year, textbooks and instructional materials shall be free, and you may not, LEAs may not charge a fee for those. The definition in statute, that's probably it right there. It's very broad, and it would include everything, such as supplies, the instructional equipment like the shears for CTE, or the band, the tuba, for band. And so one of the biggest things you all approved yesterday in draft, what will now be draft 5 with the amendments that were made, is to separate out instructional equipment, instructional supplies, because they are part of that umbrella of textbooks and instructional materials, but the reason we separated those out is to then take your recommendations to the legislature to say, yes, you can still, you LEA may, beginning with the 22-23 school year, continue to charge for instructional equipment, like the shears, like the band, the tuba, or the camera, and the supplies like the wood for wood shop or the clay for ceramics. You will be able to charge for those. They will be subject to fee waiver, however. And so we will we'll probably reach out to Representative Lisenby again since she served on the task force and ran the legislation last year, to see if she would support the board in the direction that you approved yesterday to clarify that. School uniforms, you want to go ahead and take that one?
Yeah, okay, go ahead. Text question.
I think, Chair, yeah?
Yes, go ahead, sorry.
It's Cindy.
There's no light on. Do you have a light on?
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to use a microphone. Go ahead.
Somebody on the phone.
Sorry, that was a little more informal. So I really feel like this is a great move for the extracurriculars, where students were feeling like they couldn't participate because of fees, so they weren't even signing up or trying out or whatever. So that's a great move. When it comes to the textbook arena, and looking, if we don't have this change made in instructional supplies, potentially it could be textbooks, instructional supplies, and equipment, which historically have been already fee waivable. So there was equity in place, because nobody wasn't taking a core class because they couldn't have the fees paid because they were already on fee waivers. So taking this small amount of money that we were using to support the students who needed it most, and now spreading it out to every single student, are we taking a step backwards in equitable practices? Because there will be less resources for the students who need it most. And are we going to have diminished educational programs and opportunities because of that?
I'm not the advocate for this, but I can verbalize what I think led to that decision. And it actually came from representatives of parents who said, if we're meant to have an education, a free education, the textbooks and instructional materials are the closest thing to academic access that we have. And so you remember, I think it was Representative Robertson was running a bill to eliminate all fees except for those that are extracurricular or the outside of the regular school day portion of co-curricular activities. And a certain certain voice on the task force who was representing parents at the time said, if education's supposed to be free, the very essence and core of our education system is academic access. And so it's not like we're talking about football and volleyball and these nice to have, but we're talking about the math textbook. We're talking about the fee for Canvas or for locker fees or whatever. And so that is what the task force decided to recommend. Now, you could change that because obviously there's always two sides. There's pros and cons to that. But I just wanted to give you that perspective. It was the parent voice that asked for that. And I don't know if others on the task force want to speak to that.
Did you have a follow-up?
I do have a follow-up. So I guess to that point, if it is supposed to be free and it hasn't been, and we can't know the fiscal impact this is going to have on public ed, but we've heard the figure 70 million-ish thrown out there, right? Loss from fees not being collected now. So my question is, there really are compelling reasons to make a lot of these changes. Are there also compelling reasons to advocate for an additional revenue stream to supplant the lost funds? Because our LEAs in several meetings, junctures was the word they used, they have asked for additional revenue streams and said there's absolutely no appetite from our legislature or others to advocate for an additional revenue stream. And I'm going to tax restructuring meetings and they're saying our goal is to stay revenue neutral. So I guess what I'm saying is when we do things like this and we have compelling reasons to make these changes, partnering all along the process, could we or should be, as we go along, asking or advocating for an additional revenue stream so we're not taking instructional funds that are already so limited right now. I mean, our teachers are pulling rabbits out of hats and then giving a $70 million hit with no ask for an additional stream of funds. That's my question.
Yeah. I have heard, just again, from others that there may be an appetite from the legislature to provide some funds, but I think they're hoping for some more data. I think all the work the LEAs are doing now to get their fee schedules in order and start to really recognize all the fees, I think that $71 million is likely a very low number of what actually is being spent or asked to support the schools. And so maybe once they see the new data, the updated data, and that practices are changing and that we're coming to compliance, I think there might be an opportunity to ask. And I also think if the LEAs, the districts and charters, put that as a funding priority, that would make a difference too, because I think the legislature listens,
We just have a couple more comments. So, Board Member Lear.
I would defer if Cindy's got more on that issue. I 110% agree with you. And I felt like that discussion of free textbooks kind of took on a life of its own without enough discussion in the task force. I felt like it suddenly happened and there wasn't, and we certainly didn't articulate it the way Cindy just has, which I think is a really, it's something we didn't ask for, but it takes away from the other issues. And then the second part of that is I've always been really cautious about a revenue stream for school fees because I know it will come from something else. I mean, if we're now wanting to support early childhood programs or more reading, it'll come from something else. So that's always been, and if we could guarantee that and see that, I would be, again, 150% supportive, but I'm cautious that it will come from something else.
And I'd just like to make a comment that I think throwing out that $70 million loss in revenue is a little bit premature, as LEAs are not ceasing charging fees. There still is going to be a significant amount of revenue charged in fees. It's just the compliance is being more transparent on what those fees are and what they're being charged for and how they're going to be used. And so we're not losing that complete fee revenue in the state. And so I think it's just I think some of this we need to wait and see how it comes out in the end. So board, okay. Any other questions? Board Member Davis?
Oh, just as we see how it comes out, is there some fluidity here to monitor and adjust as we see needs? I guess is my question, and that's rhetorical at this point.
Okay. Board Member Earl?
Yeah, just one of the things I thought about, one of the unintended consequences, and it deals with textbooks, is the elimination completely of textbooks to where everything's done online, which there are advocates that think that's the best way to go, and there's others that, I mean, I would be one of those. I still think there's value in a book for things. So I guess some of this stuff we will not know till we get a year down the road, and I would just hope districts would just be wise. Do you know what I'm saying? They think through this, they're thoughtful about it, they're thoughtful about the parents, the children, the programs, and in doing so, I think it alleviates a lot of the stresses about what we're doing. So I just, I would hope that may not be the case. There may be those that still, like over here, that say, I want $4,500 as our cap, which, may still be unreasonable. I'm hoping there's a balancing out of things, though, so.
So back to the school uniforms. Another key provision in this last session, and it came up during the task force, but the board doesn't have a board rule on uniforms. All the school uniform requirements are in Utah code. So that was also amended in this last year's legislation to clarify that school uniforms include activity uniforms like the choir dress or the student body officer jacket. That's what is now called activity clothing versus school uniforms. So school uniforms would be your day-to-day, polo and khakis that we tend to see more in charter schools. I don't know how many or if any school districts have uniforms. But to separate that, because in statute it states that school uniforms are not fee waivable, they're not subject to fee waiver. So now we've distinguished activity clothes because we had some families report that the student body officer sweater or the choir dress, the LEAs were saying they weren't subject to fee waiver. So that has been distinguished. Also, there's clarification that if the uniform is overly prescriptive or expensive, if it's then it is a fee and therefore would be subject to fee waiver. So an example of that many of you may be aware of is our military academy. They have nice, very nice uniforms, and they are very prescriptive and they are expensive. And I've been told it's been the practice of the Utah Military Academy to provide supports to kids who have a hard time paying the cost of those uniforms. But they also are so integral to the Utah Military Academy. It's something that identifies them, it's team building, it's part of the mission of that school.
And this was discussed quite a bit yesterday, but fundraising, about the individual fundraisers and also the no quotas, individual quotas and all activity participants share equally, and that was also changed yesterday, so we'll have to update this a little bit. And so I think that probably is well discussed unless somebody wants to. And of course, the changes in the provisions in the service in lieu of fees may not be required, and when the reference now to it as service and not. Okay. I was trying not to. 18, one more? Okay, there we go. Activity clothing. The next one back is the
Next one, so the fundraising one.
fundraising. Okay. Okay. Yeah, I'll need to update this slide from yesterday. We'll get that taken care of. Okay?
Okay. Should we move on?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Now, the corrective action is also something new. It's a shall, not a may, from the code. And so we've been asked a lot of questions about that. And we'll be putting into some policies here at USBE for the corrective action. But basically, you have to ignore 2 or 3 notifications before. But there is some fiscal impact to the school now put in place as a shall for the board to achieve, so.
And when Tammy says you have to ignore, we don't want them to ignore. I think what she's trying to say is before there's any financial corrective action taken, you would receive at least 2 notices and opportunities to develop a plan to come into compliance before any revenue would be taken from the school, et cetera. So there's going to be ample opportunity and work with our team here to work on a monitoring or corrective action plan before any monetary or limiting on their authority to charge fees would take place.
And we've talked about the school fees contacts, and we're going to do a monthly newsletter to them at least. We've also sent, I think, 2, if not 3, out already. And so we'll be keeping these people pretty informed and pretty in the loop, and we want, of course, that feedback from them also. And so we're excited to have this group working with us. About 40% of the LEAs pick someone other than the superintendent, but by and large, the charter districts and the superintendents have kind of kept that role to themselves.
And the other key component is to remember that as we get inquiries from parents or even educators from certain districts or charter schools, is that we'll be referring them back to that school fees expert to see if they can resolve the issue or take care of it at the LEA level.
Yeah, we certainly always keep them in the loop, anything we're dealing with. Okay,
Got a question. Board Member Cannon.
Thank you. I'm back on slide 21.
okay.
So the little round box says, does the LEA follow the CAP? And is that the CAP you're talking?
The corrective action plan.
Oh.
That's corrective action plan.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's corrective action
Yes, that's-
plan.
Yeah.
Okay, so I was thinking about the CAP Linda was
I'll
talking
need to spell
about.
that out then, yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
maybe put, yeah, I don't know.
Put CAP up here.
We love acronyms in education.
I know you do.
Yeah, we'll put CAP at the top.
Corrective action
I-
plan.
That's a
But
good correction.
could you just answer a question for me on the CAP she was talking about? Is that done school-wide, or is that done for individual activities, or is,
So the individual fee cap can be done per school, per activity, and you may have different charges at different schools, but the aggregate student cap, like the 2,500 or 4,000, whatever it is, probably should be done at the LEA level. I would recommend that. So you don't have inequities of one high school, the cap is 8,000, and at this one, it's 2,500. It really wouldn't work in a district, I don't think.
okay, thank you.
Okay, and then this last few slides are just the timeline, trying to emphasize that, the uniform, schools, no new certificate of compliance with base forms. I'm really excited to show that to you in just a minute. But the things there are some things that are gradually going into effect here. And of course, the 2 that were kind of somewhat delayed is next year they need to have the deadline for all their fee schedules by April 1st. They can change it after that, as long as they go through the process of the 2 meetings and the public input, but it does allow them to make those changes after the April 1st. And then also they'll have to have a spend plans, the delineation or descriptions, and the language requirements, notice requirements we talked about. And then, of course, the fun part and the accounting side of it is that in 21, 22, the fees must be equal or less than the cost of the activity, which has implications into how much these maximums, really, it will impact what the LEAs are setting as maximums, and the activity-based costing in alignment with the task force that's going to be set up to work on that. And that this is also very key, that you cannot charge more for a fee to subsidize for the waivers. You have to find another revenue source for the fee waivers, not other fees.
Right. So you couldn't, if I qualified for a fee waiver and Tammy didn't, you couldn't charge Tammy $300 for what really is just $150 for me and $150 for her. We don't, the task force was really clear in the legislature, this was a big deal to the legislature, that fees only be charged for the student's cost that is paying the fee, not to support the overall program or all your other fee waiver students.
And then, of course, the textbook part of that we've already talked about. So we probably ought to just go over to the website, talk about that, and that's the end of the PowerPoint. So I'll jump to the website, if I can. Okay, I was really excited that we have a new school certificate of compliance, web-based, and that went out yesterday. It was launched yesterday, and we sent out 1,183 emails with URLs requesting a survey that the certificate of compliance. Oops, I touched my machine. The certificate of compliance now is a web-based form, and there's actually a sample here, and I'll pull that up. And this is what they see when they get into this, and they just sit down. Before all 1,183 URLs had been created and sent out, we had 5 people already open it up. And so we had, of that, 145 people started, and this went out to board chairs, to superintendents, to principals, and districts, of course, when I say superintendents, that's district charter schools. And so 145 started it yesterday, and 65 respondents completed it. So of those who started, 45% completed it. And as I just browsed that, I didn't do any analytics on it. Most of those were the charter schools who do not charge fees. They're just stating that they don't charge fees. So we're real excited about that.
Can I just supplement to what Tammy's stating, because this was a question I received from some superintendents. They wanted to know what the difference in the certificate of compliance was for the board chair, the superintendent, charter school director, or the principal. It's the exact same questions for all 3 groups, but the board chairs and the principals are only required to attest to the knowledge of, yes, we have fees, or no, we don't have fees, we have a fee schedule, here's policies. Only the superintendent or charter director is going to be required to upload the fee schedules for each of the schools. So if a district has 10 schools within their district, they would be uploading 10 fee schedules, their fee policies, their fee waiver policies, anything that's an attachment, it's only the LEA head who will be uploading. The certificate of compliance for the board chair and the principals is to create awareness and an understanding that you are required to be complying with these policies, but they won't have to upload documents.
And as they go through, there's only like 20 or 23 questions that are here, but as you get down into the body of those, they can go out. We have linked every code, every rule, so if there's code or there's rule or both, they can hit these hot links, and they can go right then and there and read it and read about it, and then they can come back and answer the question. So this is very interactive for them to go through and have available to them.
And the other nice feature is because it's a Qualtrics created link and survey, as they're completing this, we'll be able to have data that's automatically generated. So then we can inform the superintendent or charter director that their board chair has finished, has certified. It's really great. And Tammy, our IT team, the data team, just have really made this a priority to make it easier for our LEAs to report on their compliance efforts.
So we're good. We're good. Okay. So what else are we going to take? Coming next.
So anything else on the website? Can I mention one more thing about the website? Because we've talked about the website multiple times, but we didn't just spend time there. Can you go to the guidelines and frequently asked questions? Another one of the first priorities of the school fraud projects team was to update the frequently asked questions document. There was one that was there before, but it has been completely rewritten to link to the updated statute and rule, and it's based on questions we've received since January. So they truly are the frequently asked questions. And so if you have principals, teachers that reach out to you with questions, I would reference them to the school fees website. There is a lot of information there that they may get their questions answered just by reviewing the frequently asked questions. So are there any other documents? We do have a 20-page school fees information packet that would also be a good resource for principals, coaches, band leaders.
And we'll need to update that with the changes that you made yesterday. We were kind of holding off on that because we knew these things were coming. So maybe give us another week or two, and we'll have that updated version out there.
Okay. So we kind of touched on, did you want to give any more information about that?
Yeah.
Okay, so we also wanted to just give you a heads up on what to expect moving forward. Tammy mentioned that the school fees work group has been preparing to make recommendations, and she gave you a little preview of what they're likely to recommend. But we anticipate that we'll have to bring 407 back again in a couple of months to incorporate some of the recommendations of the spend plan working group. We hope they'll be mostly limited to these fiscal issues of reporting and the spend plan issues, but we know how other things sometimes come up when we bring a rule up. We'll also be, you all may remember Board Member Davis and Board Member Scott Hansen referring to a rule R277113. That rule very much interplays with the school fees rule. It is the fiscal and auditing practices for an LEA, and we know that rule needs to be updated now that we've made so many changes to school fees rules. So we'll be bringing that to you in the next couple of months. Also, something that's coming is Tammy, once this school fees spend plan work group is done, she is going to put together a school fees advisory group. It's optional for people to participate, but we plan to have that be a place where as LEAs have concerns or things that just aren't working, or as you all have questions or you'd like updates, a place for us to work with the LEAs on coming up with recommendations to you for betterments to the policies and the program. Many of those who are participating on our spend plan working group have already expressed interest in participating on the school fees advisory group. It will be made up of school fees contacts. We've got a charter director, we've got a superintendent, and that all would like to continue to support you all, board members, local school board member who will participate on that. So hopefully they can be providing you timely updates and recommendations, and Tammy can be their voice.
Okay. Board Member Belknap, do you have a question or comment?
Yeah, thank you. It's actually back on the overview on the website, sorry. And it just seems like so often when we go here, our rule is buried, and that's really what drives the work of our districts. Is there a way to move the rule up? Because I know that the statute's important, but at this point, it's what drives it. So, thanks.
Yes, we can do that.
Yeah, and we also have this link, of course, as you were talking about yesterday. The rule isn't really updated on the admin website, so we've tried to put here just the latest and greatest, and we can move that up, yeah.
Yes. And again, as we're updating our administrative rule page, it should make it easier for us to link to that. So we are working on a lot of things right now that we hope will help you all. So I think that's pretty much, did you want to show them the timeline of what you've done as a
I've got
school?
one other quick question here. Board Member Lear?
Consistent with Laura's statement, I hope also as you prepare, one more PowerPoint and one more packet and frequently asked questions, so that's 3 additional documents to the rule, that whoever's in charge is so cautious and concerned that it reflects exactly what the rule says. So that there are not other documents that start to take on a life of their own and rules of their own, because the actual rule and law have to be met, and with every word, and that's why I made such a big deal of free school lunch versus superintendent sets the level. I think you always have to make sure that that's consistent, because that will confuse people, and if there are lawsuits in the future, it will be based on those kinds of things.
I think one of the benefits of having school fees staff is, as you may remember previously, the school fees compliance or oversight of the state board was limited to whoever the caller found. Sometimes it was Christelle Estrada in equity. It was one of our counseling staff. Sometimes it was somebody in financial ops who was answering a fiscal question. It could have been Ben Rasmussen or or Mark Peterson. So the one of the biggest advantages, and I would say to your credit, the board has made, is providing dedicated school fees staff. That now depending on who was calling, if it was a parent, they probably got Mark, Ben, or I. If they were a counselor or if they were administrator, they were probably getting somebody in teaching and learning or school support. And if they were a fiscal person, they were getting somebody in financial ops. You have all taken a step to hopefully, now we have staff that are dedicated and will be updating those documents often. Before, it just kind of, well, we're up for our 5-year review, let's make some changes. You know how it is when you don't have dedicated staff to a program. So I think, to your credit, we should be on top of it. And Board Member Lear and others, if you ever see anything that's out of compliance as far as our resources or that you don't think meets the law, please bring those to our attention. We'll fix them. We also plan to do a quarterly update to the Finance Committee on implementation, so that those implementation updates had previously been done in the Audit Committee, but that way when they're done before the Finance Committee, you all can hear what's going on and provide us feedback. We're open to it, for sure.
Angie, we have about 5 more minutes.
We're done, I think, so we're open for questions if you'd like.
We're good for questions, and maybe there'll be time for a break.
Yeah.
Questions or comments? Before this lights up, I want to thank you for your good work and the service that's been happening there. This is a big lift. Thank you.
You got a good team.
Yes, we are a good team. We're
Good team,
buddies.
yeah.
Okay, well, thank you.
There's been a lot of extra benefits that have come from the service you guys are providing. It's the quick answers and that to all the different LEAs have strengthened our relationships there too. That it's been good.
Yes.
And I keep telling everyone it's not about perfection; it's about progress. And so there's an evolution that's going to take place here, and the betterments are going to roll out. Perfection is down the road because this is such a big lift. So
It is.
thank you for your work. Board
Yes.
members, do you have anything else, or we're good to go? I think we're good to go. Thank you. Okay. Next on our agenda, I think what will be best for us to do is I'll seek a motion to go in an executive session as we're shutting things down, and that is a good time for us to have a break, and we'll get our signs up and that. So I'm seeking a motion to go into executive session for the purpose of discussing the character, professional competence, or physical or mental health of individuals. Do we have a second?
Who made the motion? I didn't hear.
Cindy. The loudest second was all here, but we had a bunch of second. Hey, good to see you. This is a roll call vote. We'll start with Board Member Gravitt.
Yes.
Oh, yes. Oh, sorry, yes.
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 Yes. Okay, we're in executive session. We'll get things shut down and the signs